Hi to all the viewers of the region. This is my new YouTube channel and I welcome you all. Some of you might be wondering why I kept my channel name Two Region. So let me tell you the reason. It's because I have created this channel to enlighten you with the knowledge and true stories from Africa and the Middle East. I will bring some untold stories which caught attention of the world. I hope you will like the content and enjoy it. Now my first series is based on a leader that came from African country Libya, whose capital is Tripoli. I will tell you about him and how he ruled for so many decades, for almost 4 decades or 40 years. Now I have a question in mind and let me ask. Have you ever heard about Gaddafi? And if the answer is no, then this is the best place to know about him, right from the beginning. Now, why I found the need to discuss about him in detail? It's because he was such a big face in eyes of Libyans. He took some big measures that completely transformed Libya. Under his leadership, Libya enjoyed international recognition and praise. He soon became the powerful person in African region with no one to question him. And whoever questioned was killed. But as you all know that everything has an end. So was his. But that end was very painful, very painful. So now I hope you all would be excited and curious to see the full story of Gaddafi, and we will understand it together. Now, Libya before Gaddafi. After World War II, Libya was ceded to France and United Kingdom, and both countries linked it administratively to their colonies in Algeria and Tunisia. However, the UK favored the emergence of a monarchy controlled by Saudi Arabia and endorsed by the UN, the Sansui dynasty, which ruled the country since its independence in 1951 under the monarchy of King Idris I, who kept Libya in total obscurantism while promoting British economic and military interests. After centuries under the Carthaginian, Byzantine, and Ottoman empires, Libya fell to the Italians in 1911. The Second World War and the Italian defeat raised the question of what to do with it. The British suggested dividing the country into 3 spheres of influence: Cyrenaica under Britain, Tripolitania under Italy, and Fezzan Desert area under the French. Arab nationalists objected, and in 1949 the United Nations decided to create an independent state of Libya. Now the independent state of Libya was created after the World War II. A National Assembly devised a monarchical constitution and offered the throne to Said Idris, Emir of Cyrenaica. Born in an oasis in Cyrenaica in 1890, Said Idris succeeded to the headship of Sansui in his teens. He spent years in exile in Egypt during the Italian regime and returned to Libya after the Axis power had been thrown out in 1943. On December 24, 1951, as King Idris I, he spoke to the new nation on the radio from Benghazi. This was the first time any leader spoke to the nation on radio. This was the first time. Now the new kingdom's prospects were not encouraging. It had no industry and not much agriculture. Its principal exports included hides, wool, horses, and ostrich feathers. And it combined one of the world's lowest income figures per head with one of the highest illiteracy rates. The economy was transformed by the discovery of oil later in 1950s. But the old king threatened to abdicate in 1964, and by 1969 he is said to have been reduced to plotting a coup that would depose him. He was first told by a group of army officers led by Captain Gaddafi, who turned the country into a republic. King Idris went back into exile in Egypt and died in 1983, while the first independent state created by the United Nations became an international pariah. Now let's talk more about Gaddafi. Muammar al-Gaddafi was born on June 7, 1942 in Sirte, Libya. Raised in a Bedouin tent in the Libyan desert, he came from a tribal family called the Al-Qattaf. At the time of his birth, Libya was an Italian colony. In 1951, Libya gained independence under the Western Allied king Idris. Gaddafi's first order of business after taking control of the country in 1969 was to shut down the American and British military bases in Libya. He also demanded that foreign oil companies in Libya share a bigger portion of revenue with the country. Reason being, the revenue of Libya from export of petroleum products was around 70%. Gaddafi replaced the Gregorian calendar with the Islamic one and forbade the sale of alcohol. Gaddafi ruled for 42 years, leading Libya to a significant advance in social, political, and economic matters that were recognized and admired by many African and Arab nations at the time. Despite his controversial government, Gaddafi came to represent an important figure for an anti-imperialist struggles for his position mainly against the US and the policies carried out from Washington on the Middle East. It is for this reason his life and death became pivotal events in Libya and key to understand the current situation. Gaddafi's government financed a wide variety of terrorist groups worldwide, from Palestinian guerrillas and Philippine Muslim rebels to the Irish Republican Army. During the 1980s, the West blamed him for numerous terrorist attacks in Europe, and in April 1986, US warplanes bombed Tripoli in retaliation for a bombing of a West German dance hall. Gaddafi was reportedly injured and his infant daughter killed in the US attack. Gaddafi got backing from African leaders, and one of the prominent leaders in that list was Nelson Mandela, who was a very big supporter of Gaddafi. In 1997, Mandela decided to go to Libya for an official state visit. The United States of America State Department said it would be disappointed if he went to the country which was believed by the West to be in sponsoring terrorism. Mandela's reply was simple and straightforward. He said, "How can they have the arrogance to dictate to us who our friends should be?" Though the West would love to portray Mandela as having always struck a conciliatory tone, this loyal icon who supported him is rarely ever spoken of. If anything, according to the Washington Post, that said Mandela was an irritation to the United States of America, thus explaining why it is not so often included in his list of heroics. Mandela went ahead with his visit to Libya on the 23rd October 1997, despite the opposition. When played out by the media, it was a case of Saint visiting a mad dog. So in this, they have referred Gaddafi as a mad dog. But the reality is, two friends met in Tripoli that October. Mandela's movement had counted on Libyan support during his anti-apartheid drive, while the West supported the oppressive white regime. Mandela was always aware of this fact when he was shown Gaddafi's compound which had been bombed by United States operatives in 1986. He said of the USA's interventionist approach, "No country can claim to be the policeman of the world, and no state can dictate to another what it should do. Those that yesterday were friends of our enemies have the gall today to tell me not to visit my brother Gaddafi. They are advising us to be ungrateful and forget our friends of the past." In a further speech delivered in Tripoli, the South African icon said his delegation was overjoyed with Gaddafi's invitation to visit Libya and had been waiting impatiently for the occasion. These were true friends who had met to the behest of the West.
Let us move on to our next questioner at the microphone over there. Mr. Edelman.
Welcome to America, Mr. Mandela. I'm Ken Edelman. Those of us who share your struggle for human rights and against apartheid have been somewhat disappointed by the models of human rights that you have held up since being released in jail. You've met over the last 6 months 3 times with Yasser Arafat, who you have praised. You have told Gaddafi that you share the view and applaud him on his record of human rights and his drive for freedom and peace around the world. And you have praised Fidel Castro as a leader of human rights and said that Cuba was one of the countries that's head and shoulders above all other countries in human rights, despite the fact that documents at the United Nations and elsewhere show that Cuba is one of the worst. I was just wondering, are these your models of leaders of human rights? And if so, would you want a Gaddafi or an Arafat or a Castro to be a future president of South Africa?
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies. That we can and we will never do. We have our own struggle, which we are conducting. We are grateful to the world for supporting our struggle. But nevertheless, we are an independent organization with its own policy. And the attitude of every country towards, our attitude towards any country is determined by the attitude of that country to our struggle. Yasser Arafat, Colonel Gaddafi, Fidel Castro support our struggle to the hilt. There is no reason whatsoever why we should have any hesitation about hailing their commitment to human rights as they are being demanded in South Africa. Our attitude is based solely on the fact that they fully support the anti-apartheid struggle. They do not support it only in rhetoric. They are placing resources at our disposal for us to win the struggle. That is the position.
Throughout Gaddafi's tenure, ambitious social programs were launched in the areas of education, health, housing, public works, and subsidies for electricity and basic foodstuffs. These policies led to a substantial improvement in the living condition of Libyans, from being one of the poorest countries in Africa in 1969 to being the continent's leader in its Human Development Index in 2011. In fact, the United Nations Development Programme 2010 considered Libya as a high development country in the Middle East and North Africa. This translated status meant a literacy rate of 88.4%, a life expectancy of 74.5 years, gender equality, and among several other positive indicators. Gaddafi had a long tenure as a leader in Libya. In this period, he accumulated huge amount of wealth. But this is a small thing. I have to take you deep into this and share some hidden facts. Now I have a question. Did Muammar Gaddafi die the richest man in the world? You will be surprised to hear a little bit about this. Muammar Gaddafi had secretly salted away more than $200 billion in bank accounts, real estate, and corporate investments around the world before he was killed. The story was repeated around the world, with various news sites reporting that Gaddafi died richer than the three richest people on the planet: Jerusalem Helio, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett combined. So you can imagine how much wealth he accumulated. So big amount. This was also considered as one of the main reasons for Gaddafi's killing, the gold dinar, the real reason behind Gaddafi's murder. The gold dinar, a groundbreaking initiative. In 2009, Colonel Gaddafi, then President of African Union, suggested to the states of African continent to switch to a new currency, independent of the American dollar, the gold dinar. The objective of this new currency was to divert oil revenues towards state-controlled funds rather than American banks. In other words, to stop using dollar for oil transactions. Countries such as Nigeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Angola were ready to change their currencies. Unfortunately, in March 2011, the NATO-led coalition began a military intervention in Libya in the name of freedom, and he was killed. This was the end of the African dream. This information was discovered through Hillary Clinton's electronic mailbox. One of the 3,000 emails showed NATO's willingness to overthrow Gaddafi's government. NATO mainly wanted to neutralize the African gold currency supported by Libyan oil reserves. At the beginning of March, the Libyan army and the many militias loyal to the government had already crushed the rebellions, thanks to their numbers and equipment. However, with the Western intervention, the dream of a unified monetary system based on gold and independent of the dollar perished. Now, as we know that in 2011, NATO intervened and took control of Libya. But there are some bases on which NATO tries to intervene in any country. So there is a definition which I would like to share with you. On that basis, they define in which country to intervene and in which country not to intervene. So let's see this. These definitions provide the framework for NATO's intervention. However, the context for the intervention is also equally important, as it presents the justification that international organizations utilized in order to respond. Each individual state has a responsibility to protect its population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. We accept that responsibility and will act in accordance with it. The international community, through the United Nations, also has a responsibility to help to protect population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. In this context, we are prepared to take collective actions in a timely and decisive manner through the Security Council. Should peaceful means be inadequate and national authorities are manifestly failing to protect their population from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. So they have stated clearly what are those different reasons which lead NATO to decide to intervene into that country. So these are the stated reasons. You can read it. Not only NATO, even the European Union also took some hard-hitting actions against Gaddafi, like it forced the sets of 26 Libyan, including members of the Gaddafi family, slapped a visa ban against them too, and extended sanctions to include the $70 billion Libyan Investment Authority, which manages Libyan oil. So these were some harsh actions took against the Libyan government and his family, Gaddafi's family. The European Union delivered an unequivocal call for him to depart as soon as possible so that the country can begin a peaceful transition of power. European leaders were united, categorical and crystal clear. Gaddafi must go. British Prime Minister David Cameron said, "We demand Gaddafi's immediate resignation." Echoed German Chancellor Angela Merkel. "The problem has a name, Gaddafi," said European Commission President Joe Manuel Barroso. "He must go." In early 2011, amid a wave of popular protests in countries throughout the Middle East and North Africa, largely peaceful demonstrations against entrenched regimes brought quick transfers of power in Egypt and Tunisia. In Libya, however, an uprising against the 4-decade rule of Muammar al-Gaddafi led to civil war and international military intervention. On October 20, 2011, amid protests supported by the governments of the United States and European Union, an armed uprising that plunged the country into a civil war, the Libyan leader was captured and brutally murdered by the rebels, and this video is the evidence how brutally he was killed. You can watch this video. Thank you.